The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Geek Nation Tours, and by you, the listener. Thank you to everyone for your most generous support. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 210, Glenbrook Games Painting Service, with hosts Neil Shook, Mike Hobbs, Mike Whittaker and Dave Luff, and guest Matt Slade. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. My name's Neil Shook, and on this particular show I am joined. He's back! The Welsh Wizard has escaped and returned to us. Hello, Mr. Hobbs.
Hello, Neil. Hello, Meeps. I has returned from the wilderness where I have wandered.
Didn't sound much like a wilderness from where I was. From where I was reading it, mate. It sounded a bit like a 4x2 cell.
Yes, I've been in interesting places that I can't talk about.
Oh right, okay. And we are joined once again by the consumer of all things cake and our resident guest musician. It is Mr. Michael Whittaker.
Reduced to second billing again.
Yes.
Welcome back, Hobbsy. I've missed you.
It's nice to be back.
Yes, and on the main part of the show, we will also be joined by Mr. Luff, who has at this point in our recording evening left us to. I think he's gone to bed.
Possibly, yeah.
It's a bit early.
He's getting old.
So, it is nice to have both of you back. Now, before we go any further, we have a couple of bits of news. A couple of bits of things to talk about. First off, disturbing news. It has come to my attention, it has been brought to my attention, that it would appear that the podcast was potentially interfered with our last episode. And somewhere around about 35 minutes in, there was some form of interference transmission got picked up in the show, which was most disturbing, and something to do with this cult that we've been discovering on Twitter. I was hoping that we could quiz the great man himself about what's going on. Unfortunately, he is not with us on this particular show, so we cannot ask him the question about what is going on with the disciples of the great Guru Luff. But all I can say is that I'm really sorry for that interruption into your listening pleasure of the usual show. I have no idea how it got there. However,
I have my guesses.
I just hope it doesn't happen again.
Well, I mean, there is the thought. I mean, obviously, he must have been put in there by a skilled IT professional. And with the fact that one of our number has been incarcerated for the past 2 weeks.
Allegedly, Neil, allegedly. There's no proof that anybody has been in any cell being beaten by Dave at all.
Really?
All hail him.
Oh, okay. I'm just wondering if somehow, somewhere, we've spawned our very own version of the Manchurian Candidate.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think we should move on.
Yes. Sorry, listeners.
I should also point out that he's not the one who knows audio editing.
So it was you, Whittaker, in the corner.
And on that bombshell, moving swiftly on.
Dum dum dum.
Oh
I
my
thought I
word!
recognised those shoes.
It's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. Oh, right. Okay. On today's show, we have for you quite a long chat, actually, with Matt Slade from Glenbrook Games Painting Services. We will chat all about how Matt ended up painting for a living, painting miniatures for a living, and even go into some hints and tips on painting. So that's all
And how
coming
I'm
up for
going
you.
to paint my night guard. Night watch.
Indeed, it was. Yeah, it's a really interesting interview, and hopefully some interesting tips on paints, brushes, and and other bits and pieces. So that's coming up in a bit. But first, what we will do, we'll take a quick break and we'll catch up with what we've been doing in the hobby in the past week. Back in a minute.
I must get through to Sergeant Watson's position. Jenkins, cover me. Whoa. Sergeant Watson, bring your men in. Withdraw.
It's all right, sir. We're enjoying ourselves.
What?
Yes, sir. It's these here chain of command rules, sir. We're having great fun.
Chain of command?
That's right, sir. It's a challenging but fun blend of command and control. It gives me the freedom I want to fight the way I want to. Never had so much fun, sir.
And we've cooked you some sausages.
Can't be helped, sir. Me and the lads are staying put.
Chain of command, World War II, platoon level rules from two fat laddies. They really put you in control. And they're even better than sausages.
What have we been playing? What have we been buying? We might even have painted something. The Meeples and Miniatures crew reveal all. So here we are, back, and it's time to find out what have we been up to. And since he's not been with us for so long, it is to the Welsh wizard himself that we come first to find out. Mr. Hobbs, what have you been up to?
Oh, well, many things. I haven't bought anything because I've obviously seen the lights. But here's a list of things.
Don't believe you.
No, I bought nothing. So here's a list of the things that I've definitely not bought over the last few
Right,
weeks.
go ahead.
Okay.
What have you not bought?
I've definitely not bought a full 15mm fully painted German army. That would have been, that would have diluted the hobby far too much for me.
Hang on a second, haven't you already got a couple of 15mm German armies?
Yes, that's why he didn't buy one, Neil. Get with the program.
Oh, sorry.
No, the 15mm German army I've got is late war, isn't it? It's sort of Panzerlehrerry. This is a very nice sort of 42, 43, probably 41, 42 period German army that I definitely didn't buy.
Oh, right, okay.
Cool. Anything
Yeah.
else you didn't buy?
I definitely didn't buy the Battle Group Barbarossa rules from Plastic Soldier Company.
To use with said 15mm German army.
The one I didn't buy, yes, that's the one.
Yeah, good. Got you so far.
Yeah.
Right, keep going.
I didn't buy any 20mm trucks to use in our OML5 scenario from Rubicon via Great Escape Games. So they haven't been bought.
So you said 20mm, you mean 28mm?
28mm, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So,
28mm, yeah.
alright, so you're not using any 28mm trucks in this scenario. Oh, hang on a second, does that mean, is this something else that you have to paint for Market Laden? If, of course, you bought the figures in the first place.
Yeah. So they're definitely not on my paint desk at the moment, half painted.
Right.
Oh, one thing I can tell you about, because it's a ball game and they don't count, according to Great Guru Love, all hail him, I bought Star Wars Rebellion.
Ooh.
And more than that, I played it.
Oh, wow. Bought it and played it. And?
It's very good. I've described it as a perfect Sunday afternoon game. You know, it's a 3-hour game. It's fantastic. It really is good. You know, it's proper strategic, sending heroes out on missions, trying to gain the support of systems, and the Imperials wandering around, stamping over systems and blowing things up with Death Stars. It's great. Really,
all those good things you'd want to do with a Star Wars game, in fact.
Yeah, and it's very clever. Really deep, great narrative in it. Brilliant. I loved it. So yeah, I got that. My submarine's arrived.
Has it?
Yeah.
The yellow one.
The one you haven't bought?
No,
you already bought that, hadn't you?
I bought that before I'd seen the
yeah.
lights. Yeah. So that's arrived. So that's in the box to be put together. And my Conan Wave 2 stuff has arrived.
Ooh.
I'm not sure whether I have anything in Wave 2. I'm assuming I don't.
So,
it's a straight King Pledge.
What was in your Wave 2 then?
You should have had the campaign book. Or was that an add-on?
That was an add-on.
I can't remember.
Yeah, so I had the campaign book, which is very nice. 19 scenarios in there, which is quite interesting. And I got the Kitai and Nordheim expansions. Yes, they're very nice.
So that's more minis and more boards.
Yeah.
More scenarios.
Another 50 minis, another 80 scenarios, another 3 boards, one of which is like a 5-level tower that you fight up because it's on fire. So is that. I've as well as playing Star Wars Rebellion, I've had a game of Over the Hills as well, which is definitely ticking a lot of boxes when it comes to Napoleonics. I love it. Really good game. Well done, Aid. And obviously Quentin as well. Painting and modelling and stuff. I've been productive. I've been making storage trays for all my armies that I've got in the 10-litre really useful boxes.
Oh, yeah.
So I've got lots of sort of 10mm, 50mm armies. And I'm just using the bottom tray. And I wanted to put a secondary tray in, so I use foam core. So I built some foam core tray levels to basically sit in there so I can put another layer of troops. And in doing that, I managed to knock off a whole box of 15mm Russians from the table.
Oh, that was the fateful
crash.
And yes. Yeah. And there was much weeping and gnashing of teeth on Twitter. Yes.
So I spent a few hours repairing that lot. That's about it. Oh, I finished my half track. My half track is now done.
Of course.
All ready for marking that then.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So that's it, really.
Oh, not at all. Nothing to see here.
No, nothing to see here at all. So lots of stuff I didn't buy because I'm now a disciple of the great Guru Lef.
Anytime you want to join the Church of Ooh Shiny, do let me know.
Well, I think they meet on a different floor of the Meeples bunker.
I'm pretty sure they do.
Indeed. Thank you for that. Acolyte Hobbs, or whatever you are now known as. We shall have to ask the great Guru next time he's on.
Yeah.
Right.
Junior Minion, I believe.
Junior Minion. Either that, or was it Novice of the Sisters of Light? One of the other. Anyway, moving quickly on. Right, okay, I think I'll go next. Right, what have I done this week? Haven't played a game. So, failed to play games. Have I bought anything? Nothing's arrived. Well, correction. One thing has arrived, which was the Conan campaign book for Wave 2, which is very, very nice. And considering it's a hardback A4 size book, let's just say Monolith didn't skimp on the packaging. You you're going to probably fit an extra 2 miniature expansions in the box, but there you go. So that's right. And yes, that is very nice. I did have a very swift conversation with Monolith on Twitter. I think it was at the start of this week, or maybe back into last week, when people started receiving second edition. I went back to Monolith and said, I was really gutted I didn't order the expansions on the Kickstarter. Are they definitely going to retail? And their reply was, oh yes. So, rumour has it I may have actually pre-ordered the expansions.
Yeah, coming out in June.
Coming out in June? Yeah, it's only, they're coming out next month. It's like, woohoo! Yeah, so as far as buying is concerned, I may have just ordered 3 Conan expansions because I remembered the other thing that the other news item. Speaking about Conan, that I meant to put in at the start of the show, and it has sprung back to mind. Thank you to everybody who has messaged us on social media and other platforms to point out that the manoeuvre that Mr. Whittaker
and Mr. Hobbs.
I did as well.
Yeah, we know. You can't teleport the princess because she's not the slender and sylph-like figure presented in her character picture.
No.
Yes. There was an awful lot of snark in our game about how in God's name is someone this slim and gorgeous and Gumbrum 6, given that a suit of chainmail is only 4.
Anyway, thank you to everybody who pointed the fact that Mike could not possibly have won by teleporting the princess off the board because she weighs too much.
I'm sorry.
It just means you have to play it again, Mike.
Play it again, Mike.
Oh, that's terrible, isn't it?
Terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. I'll have to play it again. I'm grief-stricken.
Indeed. So yes, 3 new Conan expansions, lots of goodness. What are the Frost Giants like?
You can have a look on my blog. There's a lovely blog about it with pictures and everything.
Ooh, go check that out, listeners. Yes. So yes, all of those, and that was about as far as buying anything is concerned. Although it would be nice. Come on, North Star, please deliver more samurai. Thank you. We have been scenery making for England. Well, actually for somewhere in France. But our last Thursday gaming session and all day Saturday was spent making scenery. It's a good job Luffy's on at this point, actually, because he was miserable. Absolutely grumpy pants himself. It was grumpy pants personified over the weekend. It was nightmare. But we have moved on a lot with our scenery. I think we've pretty much finished. We've got most of it done. I've got a couple of bits of garden to finish, and flock to apply, and a few other bits and pieces. But we finished that churchyard. We basically finished this brewery we were building, although Dave wasn't particularly happy with it, but hey ho. I mean, at one point, I almost had to physically restrain it from him throwing it in the weedy bin. He wasn't very pleased. So yes, much scenery building, and I think Dave is completely fed up with it, and it has to be said, I'm not that far behind at this point in time. We have been making scenery for the best part of probably 3 or 4 weeks, and we'd like to finish making scenery and go back to playing games.
See if you can get rid of Captain Grumpy Pants and have Dave back.
Yeah,
that would be nice.
Could I make a suggestion for next year's game?
Yes.
Something with less scenery.
Yeah, desert.
Desert,
yeah.
Finland.
No.
Oh, don't get started on trees. The snow. Oh.
A snowboard is hugely complicated. Oh, crikey. No, yeah, I think I'm going to do. Yeah, I think I'll have to do Bag the Hun next year.
Or just do the Russian steppes. I can lend you a partly broken Russian army.
I've got some Finns in 28 and some Russians.
Anyway,
Painted from a certain Kickstarter about a month after I joined this podcast.
Popsy, haven't you got some of that?
No, I didn't do that one.
Oh, you didn't do that one?
No.
One of the few Kickstarters you weren't doing it then.
Yeah, I saw what he was offering as extras, and I thought, there's no way he's going to produce all of this.
They have all slowly turned up.
Yeah.
Very slowly in some cases.
Yeah. I think I was in on that one, but I had to drop out because, and Mrs. MOT. Yeah. The £600 MOT bill came in for a car.
Ow!
Yeah.
Fair enough. Right. Okay, so yeah, that's about me. I wouldn't have. I've been painting Titans. Or I'm halfway through painting camouflage and Titans. 15 minutes. And it's all got to come together in 3 weeks. So no pressure there.
Could lend mine if you wanted them. I got 5. All but they're on bases, so you wouldn't like them.
No, I'm fine with bases. Mine are on bases.
That's okay then.
Bases are fine. Bases are good. Bases are cool. I love bases.
Yeah. So, Mike, what are you up to?
Basing vehicles. No, I didn't think anyone was going to buy that one.
No. Not at all. Fail.
So what have we been doing? We've been playtesting for Partisan, which is the open combat Border Reavers 4-handed little skirmish fun. We had another game. Well, Andy Miller, who is the man who gives physical form to my lunacy, turned up with some power tools on.
Oh yes, I saw the pictorial evidence of that on.
Yes, on
Facebook.
Sunday, and we've basically been building a little sort of hilly bowl in which to place a small farm. And Monday we had a very fun little play test, which included much laughter and considerable amounts of fun. One of my warband climbing a tree to shoot someone through a window, which caused great merriment, particularly since they were up on a first floor internal balcony and fell off it as a result, which was kind of fun. Yeah, it went well. It promises to be kind of fun. So if you spot us at Partisan, we're to the right. If memory serves, we are down to the right of the main entrance. For those of us who found us last year, we're in pretty much the same place, I think. And it's going to be fun. The nice folks from Second Thunder, or folk from Second Thunder, singular, I suppose, have promised us a copy of the firearm rules. So whether we'll graft those in and replace all the stuff that we've been making up remains to be seen. Colin is putting a few last finishing touches to a few bits of Renadra wattle fencing and a thatched farmhouse. But apart from that, it's good to go.
Cool.
Other than that, I'm still waiting for Paper Terrain to send me $150 worth of houses, and I'm having a massive workshop clear out over the weekend before Partisan.
Hang on a second. Haven't all these Paper Terrain buildings got to be built for Market Lot? Like 3 weeks time?
Yep.
Are we reaching?
I am not. No. They've got to be built for the next club I ain't been shot on scenario. I'm not necessarily going to be using them for Market Laden. I'm not going to be running the same scenario for the club as I am for Market Laden.
Oh, okay.
Because apart from anything else, I'd rather run one of the 2 or 3 I've already run for the club that have been play tested and seem to work.
Oh, fair enough.
Because that would be nice. So there will be. As I said, I'm not going to be. They're being done for the club stuff, so I'm not so fussed if I don't finish them. We can do something else instead. Other than that, I think that's about it.
Brilliant. Are we done?
I think we are.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, in that case, then, what we will do, we will take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be talking with Matt Slade from Glenbrook Games Painting Services.
This is a message from The Cranky Lawyer. Huzzah! Please plan to join us for 3 great days of the best our hobby has to offer. Beautiful tabletops, challenging scenarios, board games, a wonderful variety of gaming-related shopping and great company. Huzzah! May 19th to the 21st, 2017, South Portland, Maine. Miniatures games, board games, tournaments, vendors, raffle and great company. Join us for 3 days of fun. If you want to learn more about shoutouts, visit our Patreon page. The link is on the website. We hope that you're enjoying this episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you are, would you like to support us? There's a couple of ways of doing so. You can become a patron of the show by supporting us on our Patreon page. There you can give regularly every time we produce a show. Alternatively, you may want to give a one-off donation, and you can do that by using PayPal. For more details on both these options, please click on the Donate tab on our website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. Have you ever wondered what's going on in wargaming? We do too. So come with us as we go behind the hobby with the Meeples and Miniatures interview. We'd like to welcome to the show, well, for his first official time on it, considering he was actually on the episode a couple of weeks ago when we interviewed him at Salute, but it's Matt Slade from Glenbrook Games Painting Services. Hello, sir.
Hello, chaps. Hello, good to be here.
How you doing, mate? You alright?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, good, mate, good. It's great to have Matt on. Okay, here's a disclaimer. We actually know Matt quite well.
Not that well.
Not that well.
He's come to our show.
Well, okay, some of us probably know Matt more than others. Certainly had a chance to kind of chat with him on many occasions around shows and, I don't know, lardy days and various other bits and pieces. And, I mean...
Yeah, I think it's probably that sort of the large connection, I would imagine. That's sort of how we started to get to know each other a bit, I think.
That was it. And then Matt and Ralph had the unfortunate pleasure of actually playing our big cock game at Lardy Day last year.
Yeah, so it was good. Yeah, big cock, little cock, wasn't it? 'Cause it's 15 mil.
Yes.
And that, do you know, I had a small epiphany. I'm not sure if you can have a small epiphany, but I when I got home, having played your 15 mil game, I promptly put on eBay all my unpainted piles of 28 mil World War II stuff. That's
really?
Awful. Yeah, mainly because I've got a large-ish collection of 20 mil World War II stuff.
Yeah.
Up in the loft, which I used to use with one of my old gaming groups for doing rapid fire. So it's quite a lot of kit. And because of Chain of Command, I'd gone out and spent quite a lot on Black Tree World War II stuff. You know, whenever they had one of their silly sales.
Yeah.
But having played the 15 mil version, I thought, why on earth am I mucking around getting 28s when it looks so good with 15s? While my 20s are nearer there. I now do not possess a single unpainted 28 mil figure in World War II.
Are Black Tree ever not having a sale?
Well, they always have a sale on one part of the range or another. So it's quite a good source of stock figures for me, to be honest, when I'm trying to stock up my stand. Because if there's something on offer at any one time, then I'll pick it up. But yes, you're quite right, Mike. There's always some sort of daft sale on.
It's like Foundry, never pay full price.
No, absolutely.
We digress and we'll come on to that in a minute, I think.
Yeah, sorry. That's not good. We're digressing already. Only about 5 minutes in.
Oh, yeah, so anyway, we were thinking about inviting people on the show and actually talking to different people in the hobby. You know, not just publishers, but other people who do other businesses in the hobby. And obviously, and one of the Matt sprang to mind, as Matt is a full-time miniature painter. Is that an accurate description?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I've been full-time. I'm into my 5th year now, full-time.
Wow. Okay. So we're going to chat to Matt all about that. We might even get him to divulge a few secrets. You never know. And obviously, if you've been following us on social media for the past 24 hours, we did kind of ask out that if anybody had any questions for Matt, please let us know. And I think we got a couple of sensible answers. So we'll come on to that later. Anyway, but before we go any further, and I mean, again, the other thing is, Matt's a podcast listener as well, so he knows the drill on what's coming next. So, as a first-time official guest on the show, Matt, the first thing we need to know from you is, how on earth did you get into wargaming?
Well, that's a very good question, Neil.
I'm glad you think so.
I really wasn't expecting that question. Right. Well, I was born in 1970. So, as a regular listener to the podcast, obviously the gamers tend to fall into various sort of eras. So I started off basically crawling around the floor with Airfix soldiers, the 172nd ones. To be honest, before I even knew what they were, the story goes that I used to play up about going to the play school when I was little. So my mum would pick up like one of those old Britain's Timpo figures for me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't every day. I can't imagine that for 1 minute. But I started to amass a few of those. And then the next thing that I remember, I had just piles and piles of the old Airfix 20mm figures. As I say, at that age, I didn't even know, what was French and what was British. I had no idea whatsoever. My dad put a blob of blue paint on one lot and a blob of red paint on the next lot. And then we used to spend hours lining them up in neat ranks, and then we'd throw Lego bricks at them. And that was my first wargaming, probably at the age of about 4. The funny thing is, we even introduced rudimentary rules, especially for those pesky lying down figures, because they're quite hard to prove that you've killed them. So if you didn't flip them over, they weren't dead. So we even had rules back then. So yeah, I basically grew up through the 70s, watching monster movies and getting into Star Wars and all that sort of thing, and basically playing with toy soldiers. Had a big collection of anything Airfix related. Had the old model aircraft. I was quite into model making, so I had those dangling from the ceiling. Yeah, real traditional sort of 70s kid, really. And then in the sort of early 80s, so it would have been sort of about, I think I was about 13, so about 83, 84, my history teacher started up a War Games club. Oh. And it was using his collection of 20mm Airfix figures. Now, obviously, by the age of 12, 13, I had actually worked out which ones were supposed to be French and British, just about. Mm-hmm. And again, all there was Airfix. This was before SG and Italieri hit the scene. So I think I've no idea what rules we played. There was an awful lot of maths and angles involved. So I'm guessing it may have been some sort of Featherstone type set. But we knew no different. So suddenly I had a reason to actually paint the figures properly. So what I did, and of course being so limited by the ranges of the Airfix figures that were available, because at this stage I had absolutely no idea of the wider hobby at all, I'd take myself up to the library where they had some Blandford Press uniform books. And basically I'd look for any uniform that looked a bit like any of my figures. So my French infantry became Dutch and all sorts of different stuff. My American Revolution Grenadiers became Austrian Grenadiers because they had the right sort of hat and all this sort of thing. So I started getting really interested in the sort of uniforms and that side of things quite early on, which I think has probably stuck with me ever since. So that was my first introduction into it. Now, unfortunately, that history teacher, he left the school, went off to another school in Bournemouth at the time. So I was living in Dorchester. But I stumbled then into War Games magazines. So in those days, you had military modelling, which still had a little bit of wargaming in it, but I was also interested in the model making as well, and miniature war games. And I was flicking through one of these. It was the military modelling magazine, And there was a column there about war games rules, and it mentioned a set of World War One aircraft dogfighting rules by an M. Goddard of Isom Way in Dorchester. And I thought, well, that's a bit weird, because my maths teacher is Mr. Goddard, and Isom Way was where the boarding house was for my old school, because my old school used to be a grammar school.
Okay.
Before I got there, unfortunately, it was a normal comp by the time I got there, but we still had boarders. Anyway, I was walking into town one day, and I saw Mr. Goddard, and I said, Sir, is this you? And he said, yes, it is, Matthew. And M. Goddard is Martin Goddard, who is now, of course, Mr. Peter Pig. So little did I know that my maths teacher was to go on to become Martin Goddard of Peter Pig.
Wow.
But he'd written these rules, and of course he was a member of the Weymouth Club, but he introduced me to the Dorchester Club, which was where I lived at the time. And to be honest, that was it then. I was up at the club every week. Where the club was, it was in a sort of very small family-run department store. But the toy department was fortunately run by a wargamer, so that gave me access to like Essex figures, basically off the shelf, Games Workshop stuff as well. And the club was actually in their staff room on a Thursday night. So so that was really how I got into it. So this was sort of mid-80s.
Mm-hmm. So
I was playing mainly historical games. Martin Goddard's, even back then, was prolific with his rules writing. American Civil War set of rules, which he converted from the old WRG set, which my old Dorchester group is still playing even now, although they've been heavily modified even more. So so got into the historical stuff, went through a Games Workshop phase, then around sort of 18, 19, discovered pubs and stuff, so I did have a couple of years out, and then basically just found my way back into the group. And as I said, I've just been immersed in it ever since. I joined the prison service in 1997.
Right.
So I've skipped on a bit, but basically I was wargaming regularly up until that point. And then I did move around the sort of south of England for a few years with the job. But everywhere I went, I was really fortunate. I sort of fell on my feet with really interesting groups of gamers. My first move was up to Gillingham in North Dorset, and I met a bunch of guys up there, and that was purely where I painted some figures for the toy shop owner to put in his window with contact details. And a guy from a local gaming group saw them and said, "Oh, do you want to come along for a game?" So I met those guys. Then I moved over to Reading and got involved with the War Games Association of Reading, who are the guys who do warfare. So I had a cracking few years there. And now I'm over in the Forest of Dean, which is in Gloucestershire, for those who don't know. And even here, we've got numerous little clubs. We've got our own little club actually in the middle of the forest. Then there's a club in Gloucester. There's clubs in Ross-on-Wye. And also I'm only about an hour away from Cardiff. So Firestorm Games is handy. And of course the new centre of the gaming universe, which is Abergavenny, which is not far away either. So in fact, me and Ralph are venturing out of our forest dwellings and going over to Abergavenny towards the end of May for a game with Mark and Dave and Jeff. Hello, Jeff.
Sorry, I missed that. Hello, Jeff. Yes.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to that. Yeah, we're going to have a go at Mark's Basic Impetus, Wars of the Roses. So yeah, gaming-wise, that pretty much brings us up to date. I mean, I can give you a potted history of where the painting service sort of developed from, but
that sounds like a tremendously good idea. I mean, first off, were you painting right from the start? I mean, you said you kind of got into modelling a lot. So is that kind of where the painting started?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my own sort of playing with toy soldiers on the road type thing. Apart from my dad's sort of rudimentary painting, and until I actually saw a table full of painted figures, at the War Games Club that my history teacher started up, the idea of sitting there and painting a load of figures, it had never even occurred to me really. I thought Blob of Red and the Blob of Blue was as good as it got really. Although I was fancying myself at I got quite impressed when I used to actually bother to paint the pilot before I assembled my aircraft, that sort of thing.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and my sort of painting proper started with that first War Games Club. So that no one thought to play with unpainted figures. it was generally only the history teacher had a massive pile of painted Airfix figures. And I think there were only one or two of us who actually had figures ourselves. Yeah, most of the kids would use the stuff that the teacher brought along. But it was around the time, as I said, just after, in fact, while that club was going on, Esky did start bringing out the other, some of their Napoleonics. So all of a sudden we had Lancers. They brought out Prussian Landwehr Lancers.
Mm-hmm.
So that is probably, and the Scots Greys that they did are probably two of the first sets of figures I actually painted properly, or as near as damn it. And of course, it was all enamels in those days. So my mum didn't like the stench of it. So in the summer, I'd be out in the garden painting, trying not to paint the cat.
That and cleaning the brushes.
Yeah.
I got into such trouble with our laundry sink.
Yeah. Sort of soon discovered acrylics mainly as a necessity because I wanted to paint all year round, really. So, and again, in those days, we had the Airfix acrylics. They were available, not an awful lot else. When I started to get into fantasy wargaming, Warhammer, that sort of thing, I did then discover the Citadel range of paints. And I think that really got me going on the painting side because it's so much easier to use these paints than it was to use the Airfix enamels were always quite gritty. Yeah. And sorry, not the enamels. The Airfix acrylics were quite gritty, and the enamels obviously have enamels issues. Tough on brushes and tough on everything else. So the sort of painting sort of took off from there, and it's ever since it's always been at least half the hobby for me. I'd say I've been very fortunate that I've always landed in areas of the country where there's been wargamers that do the similar sort of thing to me. So I've been very fortunate, but I think even if I wasn't gaming, I'd still be painting because it's always been as much part of the hobby as the gaming for me.
All right. So, at what point did this all start to potentially become a business? Yeah. How on earth did you get started with that?
Quite early on, actually. I mean, the first few shows that I went to, again, I bumped into Mr. Goddard. It took me a long time to call him Martin. and to be honest, I still, sometimes when Martin speaks to me, I still feel like I'm one of his schoolboys. He's great. He's absolutely brilliant. Got me through my Maths O level, that man did. But yeah, when I told him that I was going to actually give up my job in the prison service and do it full time, the look he gave me would have, it was like a careers master. You're thinking, what on earth do you think you're doing, young man? But,
Paddington hard stare sort of thing is what I'm sorry.
Yeah, are you mad? But let's say, ironically, Martin's got an awful lot to be responsible for, really, as well as my Maths O level. Because this again, in the very, very early days of Peter Pig, I obviously bumped into Martin at various shows. And I'm fairly sure it was his idea, because he knew that I enjoyed painting and seemed to have a bit of a knack for getting it done. So he suggested that I paint a few of his figures, put them on his stand with some contact details, and basically try and get me some pocket money, really. So I'd barely left school at this stage. So I was sort of 18, 19,
mm-hmm.
just going into full-time work. And I got a couple of commissions off the back of it. I thought, this is okay. But again, we're talking 1988, 1989. So doing it full time professionally was a long way off at that stage. Yeah, Martin also put me on to the Society of 20th Century Wargamers journal, which at the time, if you offered them a discount, they'd give you free advertising. So I put a little advert in there, and again, a couple of people got in touch, and I did a few odds and sods of jobs for them. Then, much later on, of course, we get the eBay era. So I'd built up a large collection of Warhammer armies, although I only ever played it with one of my mates, another Martin. And eventually we just found that we weren't playing it anymore. So I started selling off huge amounts of my old collections. And again, I started to get queries from people who bought stuff from me, or who had seen the stuff but hadn't bought stuff from me, saying, do you do commissions? And I thought, well, I suppose I could. It just hadn't really crossed my mind. So again, I got a few odds and ends of jobs there. I'd say 1997, I joined the prison service. as a prison officer.
Hmm.
So, I was far too busy to be doing an awful lot other than my own sort of hobby stuff. And I was, quite happily. Again, I'd every so often have a bit of a clear out on eBay, and again, you'd get the occasional query, or like your painting, would you consider doing a commission? So every so often, I'd just do a little job here and there. On those sort of very dark days that you can have in the prison service, there were often days where I thought, you know what, I'm going to jack this in and paint soldiers for a living. And then, of course, I'd sort of look at my mortgage statement and think, don't be stupid. And then I look at my pension statement and think, don't be stupid. And I went back to, just carried on.
Yeah.
But I got to it would have been about 7 years ago, and I was working at Huntercombe prison up near Reading, which is a young offenders prison. It's for juveniles, 15 to 18-year-olds.
Right.
And despite the fact that it was utter chaos most of the time, it was the best 5 years that I had in the prison service. It was cracking. It was really rewarding, actually working with kids that you felt you could actually do something useful with them. Because once they're into their sort of 20s, it's there's not a lot you can do with them. It's up to them when they're going to stop offending. Thoroughly enjoyed it, but then they re-rolled the establishment to a Category C adult establishment. So I immediately thought, I'm not sure I can put up with whinging middle-aged men, asking for their, demanding this, that, and the other again. And so, as it turned out, that's exactly how it did feel when it re-rolled. So I started looking around for other parts of the country, and Gloucester came up, and that is a different type of prison. It's a Category B local prison, so it's basically where all the prisoners get sent from direct from court.
Yeah.
So I thought, that's a different type of prison. Let's give it one more crack. So I moved over to Gloucester, and I really didn't enjoy it. But one of the reasons for moving over to this part of the country was that the property prices were so much cheaper than Reading, where we were living. And there were starting to be murmurings about prison closures and redundancies. So we were sort of setting ourselves up so that if any possibility did come up of me getting out with some sort of payout, I could take it. So I'd managed to go part-time while I was at Gloucester. So I basically halved my hours. And that was the point. So this was about a year before I actually packed up. That was the point where I really went hard at the show circuit, got myself a bit of an online presence, social media, and really started building up some customers. Yeah. And that just took off. The next thing I knew, my diary was pretty much chocker. So basically I was finishing a shift at work, getting home, painting straight away. To be honest, it wasn't a lot different from what I did when I was doing it for myself. But obviously you've got the added pressure of having to, keep customers happy. So I was doing that, so sort of solidly part-time for a good sort of 6 months or so. And then they put out an offer for my senior officer rank, which I'd got to by that stage, that they were basically doing away with the rank, and anyone who was a senior officer could apply for a redundancy package. So I thought, I'll stick my paperwork in and see what happens. And lo and behold, while that was going through, they announced a round of prison closures, one of which was Gloucester. So it became a case of if you'd applied for it, you'd get it if you worked at one of these closing prisons. Yeah. So I took the leap, because I'd sort of proved to myself that the work was out there. I'd fully expected to sort of have half my time as sort of commission work. And then I was expecting to have like a web store, paint up units to sell and actually have a stock of painted units. Yeah. But as it's transpired over the last 5 years, my diary is absolutely chocker now with full-time commissions, and my stand that I take around the shows. That is, anything that's on my stand at the shows is for sale, but it's essentially a travelling advert. So there'll be shows where I don't sell a thing from the stand, but it's not really about that. It's about just getting my face out there and recognised. And it seems to really have worked as a business model, because I've got some great loyal customers already, and even today I've had a couple more inquiries from brand new customers. So I was very lucky, really. It all sort of fell into place quite nicely. I've never worked so many hours in my life. I have to say that it really is a full-time job. But compared to what I was doing, I will never ever complain about painting soldiers for a living. So that's pretty much how I get to where I am today.
Right. Now, obviously, not a lot of people would turn around and effectively turn their hobby into their business. So obviously you've gone to the point of, okay, well, you basically got your name out there, got your work out there, and then took advantage of a redundancy package. It was always, I suppose, a conscious decision to do commission painting in the first place.
Yeah.
You kind of say, oh, well, yeah, I'll put a few figures in there, and then a few people asked a question, and then put some stuff on eBay. Was it really that simple?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems a little, in some ways, people kind of go, well, can you just do that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate. One of the main fortunate things would be the fact that my wife, Debs, was totally 100% behind me. Because I'll be honest, before the prison service, I'd worked at Dorset Police Headquarters as an admin officer for the best part of 8 years. So for sort of 23 years, I'd had a pay packet. And that first month, when there wasn't one, was a little bit scary, I have to admit. Even though, I got quite a generous settlement from the prison service, and also I'd been fortunate in that I had been able to go sort of fully part-time with the prison service. So, and if I'd wanted to, I could have gone back full-time. So that was fortunate as well. Yeah, I was in the position to sort of give it a go, and sort of test the waters properly. So going part-time also freed up a lot of the weekends. So it meant I could start attending quite a few shows. And also, meeting customers at the shows, I think that was really interesting because I learnt so much of what had gone wrong for other painters. Mainly from their customers, of course, not from the painters themselves, because many just seem to sort of vanish into thin air after a while.
Yeah. So,
I came up with a few ideas about how I was going to sort of plan out my workload and that sort of thing. I don't do one big job from start to finish. I break people's workloads down into monthly amounts. So what it means is that for example, if I look at what I've been painting this week, and this is all part of ongoing larger orders, but I've been doing Napoleonic 15mm, hassle-free 28mm, sort of fancy guys. I've got what else is on the table? Some very British Civil War figures. So what it means is that every day I'm doing something different. Because I was very conscious that a lot of painters were taking on massive jobs, taking a large chunk of the money up front, and then trying to get from start to finish on these massive jobs. Because the other thing is you're then scratching around looking for another job at the end of it, and you're making people wait longer and longer and longer. So I was really, really determined to try and keep as many customers on my books at any one time as possible. So if one drops out, it doesn't matter, because I can hopefully find more to cover it. It means that I don't get bored. Yeah, every day I'm painting something different. So even if it's something that I really don't like painting, not that there's that. Nothing really leaps to mind. Austrian Napoleonics, white, and more white. And I'm a black undercoater, which I think we'll get onto later. So that's a bit of a bugger. But if I've got, and I've had it in the past, several thousand Austrian Napoleonics to paint, I'm not doing them every single day for 6 months. I'm doing them one day a month. And it means that I know how much money's coming in. It means my customers can also budget as well. It's a lot easier for them to shell out, a smaller amount each month and suddenly come up with a big lump of money at the end of the job.
Yeah.
So I did put a lot. I did put a lot of thought into how I was going to sort of structure the workload. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, is it going to spoil your hobby?" and all that sort of, the sort of thing you hear a lot. And I've made sure that it hasn't. I've always had a War Games club.
Yeah, there is that old adage of, never make your hobby your job because it will never be the same again, sort of.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and I was conscious of that. But as I say, even when I wasn't painting for other people, I'd get home from work and just sit there and paint. I don't get out much, to be honest. So, so to be honest, wargaming and Doctor Who are sort of my two main sort of interests and hobbies. I don't play golf. I'm not out I'm too old to be out on the tiles every weekend. So I'd pretty much paint all the time anyway. So, but what I found was that whether it goes in a box and I send it off to my mate Larry in Alaska, or I stick it in a box that goes in my loft, never to be seen again until I eventually play with it. Didn't actually make that much difference. It's just the painting is what I just enjoy doing it. As I was saying, having come from the prison service environment, believe me, it's a vast improvement on quality of life and mental health, physical health. So far I've not been spat at, sworn at, or punched as a figure painter. I'm sure it'll happen eventually. But all those things used to happen in the prison service. So yeah, painting figures for a living is cracking. I get to go to loads of shows, get to meet loads of gamers. I get to paint loads of figures that I would never have actually bought to paint myself. And in some cases, it's got to the point where I get slightly muddled as to when I see new figures come out, and I think, oh yeah, I'd like some of those. But then I get a commission to paint some, and it sort of scratches that itch. So I don't then bother buying them for myself because I don't want to paint them again. So that's quite good. Another benefit. But yeah, and then it was funny when I was first doing the show circuit. Well, the first show I did, I think it was the old Theo show, which doesn't exist anymore, which is a very small show. And I was there basically. I had a green cloth on my table, and my display was some of those things that you put in shelves to put your bean tins on so that you can see what's at the back of the shelf. That was essentially it, which was a bit pathetic and amateurish. Went up to Allenwell and suddenly realised that my little stand was just going to vanish. So we then started working on getting the nice display stuff done. The wooden display that you will have seen at the shows, that was actually built for me by a guy that I worked with at the Gloucester prison. We were doing a set of nights. Turned out his sort of paying hobby was woodwork, and he's got one of those big engraving machines in his garage. So early on in the week of nights, he'd said, "Oh, I could do you a sign." By the end of the week, we've come up with a design for a whole display stand. So that's where that came from.
Cool.
Then we've got lights, and then it's just it just makes you look, put a nice sort of professional look on the stand, And I think getting back to going out around the shows, people actually have a chance to pick the things up and see exactly what they're going to get for their money, because the stuff that I take to the shows is exactly the same standard as I paint commission work to. So they can look at the stuff, they can meet me, have a chat with me, decide whether they think I'm a right old cowboy or not, and then commission me if they want. And I think that's been that's been where I've picked up the most work from. I've got a website with contact forms and stuff, which occasionally I get hit through, but the vast majority of my work has come through actually meeting people in person. And I think I'm one of the few painting services that actually gets out over a really wide area. There's a couple down here, a guy called Sean Jewett that actually paints a few of my bits for me, believe it or not. So there's quite a few in sort of smaller, sort of local areas that do a few of the shows. But I go up to St Helens, Hammerhead. So yeah, I've travelled quite widely, and it's amazing how quickly you become part of the furniture. We do Antwerp as well, the Crisis show, and I think I knew I'd made it when I had people coming round and I was on their shopping list, and that was really quite cool. That was in Antwerp, funnily enough. And I thought, I think I've made it now. But it's funny. I was talking to Jeff Bond, funnily enough. Hello, Jeff, because of course he started doing the shows with his Ham and Jam buildings. And it's quite interesting seeing someone sort of starting from scratch. And I've been sent it. It's amazing when you're something new at a show. I sort of assumed that people would be keen to see what you were because you were different, and I actually found it was quite the opposite. Because you were unusual and sort of alien, I actually found people were just walking straight past the stand as if you didn't exist. It was really weird just for the first sort of round of shows.
Oh, right.
The second time I did all the shows, it was as if I'd been there forever. It was really, really weird. And chatting to Jeff, I think he's had similar experiences while he's been starting off. You just have to persist, I think. And as I say, it's very, very quickly you become part of the furniture.
Yeah. So you say, okay, you take your figures to the show, and that's what people get. I mean, do you offer different standards, or
as far as your commission work is concerned, or
No, I don't.
How does that all work? Because I know some people do, don't they?
Yeah, again, when I was sort of trying to work out how I was going to go forward with it, I looked around to get an idea of prices as well. And I needed to make sure I wasn't pitching myself too expensive or too cheap. And there's quite a dazzling array of options that people do offer. Showcase standard, collector standard, and of course they're all entirely subjective. So
as I say, the amount of collector standard painted miniatures that you pick up off eBay, which are interesting.
Absolutely. Because when I did start, when I was selling some of my stuff on eBay, where I did actually paint it to sell it, I did start off putting it as pro painted because I thought, well, I'm doing it for money, so therefore it's pro painted. And essentially, that's all that pro painting means, is that you're doing it for money. And to be honest, anyone who puts stuff on eBay is doing it for money. So I actually ended up dropping that. So I thought if people want to buy my stuff, they'll buy it, whether it says pro painted or not. When it came to the commission side of things, I very quickly decided that I wasn't going to offer various standards. And that was mainly because I'll go back to those poor old Austrians again. I always pick on the Austrian Napoleonics because they're white, more white, and I undercoat black. I thought if I got a commission for some sort of superior standard painting on something like that, which is quite difficult to do anyway, I thought that's going to drive me nuts. And the amount of extra money I would earn for it wouldn't compensate for the extra amount of time that it would take. And of course, if an order takes me twice as long, so it says it's 2 days worth rather than 1 day, I could be looking after 2 customers, whereas I'd only be looking after 1 and essentially earning the same amount of money. So I very quickly decided, no, just stick. I've got a stand. I mean, I can paint to higher standards, but I didn't really want to leave myself open to having to do it. So I've got the standard of figures that are painted on my stand. I can do that day in, day out. And it doesn't matter what is thrown at me, I can do it. It doesn't matter fantasy, sci-fi, historical. I'm quite happy to paint to that standard for everything. If someone comes to me with a commission, say a small sort of skirmish group, really good quality figures where it's going to be worth my while and worth doing it for the figures. I mean, there are some figures out there, I could paint them for 3 days rather than 1 day and they wouldn't look any better. Yeah, and that's not a criticism of the figure. It's just some figures don't suit particular painting styles.
Yeah.
If someone does come to me with a small order and it's figures that I think it's worth putting the extra effort into and it's not going to take a huge amount of extra time, I will offer a higher level of service. I'll give you an example. I've been painting some House of Free figures today, and that customer, he does have them done to an extra level. And basically it means that the whole figure basically gets an extra couple of levels of highlights and the faces get extra facial features. I don't normally paint eyes in, for example. Again, a
man after my own heart. Eyes?
Yeah, well, and certainly not on sort of big battalion level stuff. It would drive me up the wall. Extra definition on lower lips and things like that, which I wouldn't normally do. So I basically offer that. So I don't advertise it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So essentially I've settled on the 1 standard, as I said, just because I can do it, day in, day out, and without getting hacked off with it, to be honest.
So how does that process go? I mean, for example, there's a parcel turned up on the doorstep from a customer with, let's say, a box of, I don't know, Perry's War of the Roses. What do you do?
Oh, blimey, that's a question. I'll tell you what I do probably is stick it in their drawer, because I've got a big unit of they are really useful boxes.
Without which the war games hobby will be dead.
Well, indeed. But have you seen those lovely drawer units that they do, which you can combine into?
There's several in my workshop.
Yeah. So I've got one of those which is absolutely heaving with work. Because that's a funny thing with some of my painting customers. I mean, some of the figures I've got. Obviously, I often hear you guys joking about lead mountains. I have my own lead mounting.
Right.
I also have lots of other people's lead mountings, because some of the figures I've got here waiting to be painted, I've had for years. Now, it's not because I'm slow. It's not because I can't be bothered to do them. It's because they go to a show, they see the new shiny thing, and I get an email. And they say, Matt, is there any chance that you could do these next? I said, well, of course I can. I can do these Wars of the Roses that Mike Whitaker's just talking about. Yes, of course I can do these Wars of the Roses, but I have got, about 2 years worth of work for you lined up. Yeah, that's all right. We'll get round to that. So that's often how that conversation goes. So essentially my diary, the bulk of my diary is the same names every month. So if, for example, it was yourself, Mike, and it was your turn to do those Wars of the Roses guys, I would, how many's in a box? About 30 odd? Something like that, isn't it?
So,
a monthly batch is normally about 30 28mm figures. Which is essentially a day's painting. That's roughly how it breaks down. When I decided on my sort of prices and the standard I was going to paint to, I basically set myself a daily target because I didn't want to be any worse off than I was in the prison service. So I've got a sort of a minimum number of figures that I need to paint every day, and it's actually quite easily achievable when if you put in the time. And again, I worked that out based on those poor old Austrians again, because I thought, well, if all I had to paint was Austrians, how many of those could I do in a day without shooting myself? And that was sort of how I worked out how many I was going to do. So if it was, say, tomorrow was Mike's day for painting, then that's when I would paint Mike's next lot of figures. If he'd sent me 2 boxes, so I had 60 figures, then I'd probably do 30 of them tomorrow, and then 30 of them on the day the following month. And that's it really. Right. Do you want a more sort of detailed?
Well, yeah. Let's forget for the moment they're plastics, because that's a whole separate extra pain in the neck. But for the sake of argument, it's 30 nice peri-metal War of the Roses from the things that they don't do in plastic yet. So you're basically expecting to turn those around in a day.
Yeah.
Is that including things like drying time for the undercoat and so on and so forth?
No, that's assuming that they're undercoat. So basically on my, I ought to post a picture of my paint table. It is hilarious at the moment. It's hysterical. There's stuff everywhere. But
I think what I'm getting at is obviously you have a set process that A, gets things done, and B, stops you going crazy.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that there's always something to be done. Most people that I paint for, they want the basing done as well. Some will do it themselves to match their existing armies, but generally I do the basing as well. So that's another thing which takes sort of at least a day's worth of stages. Where stuff dries and the basing sets, and then you've got to put the wash on and dry brush and flock. So basically on my table I've got various sort of stations. So I've got stuff which is undercoated, ready to go tomorrow. I've got a load of artillery pieces and some crooked dice figures. So they've been prepped and they're ready to go tomorrow. That's tomorrow's job. Also, I've got stuff which has come in from the garden, haven't been varnished. So that will that will have all the basing and stuff done at some point as well. And then I've got the stuff that's actually in front of me on the table, which is midway being painted. So there's always something going on. So I mean, even if I'm sat in front of the TV with Debs, I'll normally have a tray on my lap and I'll be cleaning something up or assembling something. There's always that little job that I think, if I just do that before I go to bed. This is what I mean about never having worked so many hours in my life. So because I think, well, if I put the wash on the base just before I go to bed, that'll be dry in the morning. I can get them dry brushed, finished, and posted. So there's always there's always something going on. So the sort of painting in a day has to allow for, as well as painting whatever I'm painting that day, I also need to be probably finishing some stuff off from the previous day and prepping some stuff for the next day, if you see what I mean. Does that make sense?
Yep. Perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's basically sort of a production line.
Oh yeah. Oh absolutely. Yeah. It's quite industrial. Yeah. Things like what have I got? I can use as an example. I've got some Spanish Napoleonic, some Eagle miniatures Spanish. Now they're all marching fellows. and I don't have to base those. So basically they're all stuck onto small lengths of batten, about 8 inches long. So I've got 6 figures fixed onto each of those. So that's how I generally paint figures which are all doing the same thing. So I hold that batten in my hand. There's a lot of time and motion study has gone on, because just the act of having to pick the figures up, if they're all based individually while I paint them, it takes a bit of extra time and you're more likely to miss stuff. Whereas if I've got 6 marching Spanish all lined up neatly on a piece of wood, I hold that in one hand and basically work my way along the figure. Cross belts, do them all at the same time, faces, do them all at the same time. Yeah, very much a production line. So you end up with sort of production lines within the painting. And also, as I say, when you're doing all the basing and the various stages are also a production line as well.
There you go, Mr. Luff. Time and motion painting. A man after your own heart, mate.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Got to get the time and motion in there.
You just have to put the time in. There's no sort of... There's obviously, quick methods and stuff for painting, but essentially you've just got to have the discipline to be able to sit there and just do it. And as I say, when it's for a hobby thing, it's not... it's easy to be distracted, but when you know that actually this is how you pay for your food and your petrol and your house and everything, it does give you much more motivation. It's easier to keep yourself disciplined, I think, when basically you've just got to do it, But as I keep saying, going back to what I was doing before, I'm not complaining about painting figures for a living. I never would, and also Debs wouldn't let me because she'd hit me. So I say it is one big old production line. So I'll take a picture of my table. Well, I'm not sure if I should, because it'll make me look incredibly disorganized. But I know what's happening, which I suppose is the important thing.
What brushes do you use? I've got to ask that. What's your brush of choice?
Right, I'll tell you, what brush do you think I use? Throw that back at you guys.
Well, probably something like a Winsor Newton would be, I suppose, the typical choice, but I bet you don't.
Well, I do use Winsor Newton. But I use the Cotman watercolor brushes.
Yeah.
Which are downside cheaper than those Sable.
The Sable ones.
Chappies. Yeah, it's a funny one. I try not to get involved on Facebook. Yeah, in fact, mainly Facebook, where there's discussions about what brushes people should use, because the one that I always hear is the old Kolinsky Series 7, is it? I think that's the one that often gets thrown out there.
Dave, are they your favourite brushes, Kolinsky 7s?
No, not Kolinsky 7s. I always used to use Vallejo brushes, which were Kolinsky Sable. But, I mean, those brushes, Neil, you can know that I'm still using them, and I've used them as long as I've known you.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm quite tough on my brushes. I'm not very good at looking after them, mainly because I haven't got time.
Yeah.
So they do get a bit of a battering. I have used more expensive brushes in the past, but sometimes you can be unlucky with a brush, whether it's a cheap one or an old one, or an expensive one, sorry. And they can go, you can get the old split quite quickly sometimes. And rather than risking it on the more expensive brushes, I've settled on these Cotmans, because depending where you get them, I get a lot through online art suppliers, and they're forever offering discounts and stuff. So I just get a big bundle of them. So I generally have a 0 and a 00, 20 on the go. They're my main brushes, with the number 1 as well. So they're the ones I find they keep a good enough point, and they're pretty robust as well. So one of those, even when I'm painting, full time, they'll last me maybe a month if I'm lucky. But I'm looking at sort of about £3 a brush, I think, something like that, not very expensive. So that they're generally what I use. I also have one of the other ones that I use a lot of. There's a post office in Ross-on-Wye that sells these brushes. They're 99p each, and all it says on the brush is Royal ECT, and I buy them by the handful. That I get the number 6s, so they're big fluffy brushes, but they're fantastic for undercoating and dry brushing. And as they go through the various stages of their life, they get relegated to terrain projects and that sort of thing. But some of those, they almost don't resemble paintbrushes anymore, but they're absolutely fantastic. So again, whenever I see those, I just I pick up a great handful of those. They're great for the rough jobs. But yeah, my general day-to-day painting, that's the Winsor & Newton Cotman.
So that takes us on straight away then to paints, and what sort of paints do you choose? And do your customers specify certain paints, or do they just leave it up to you?
Fortunately, they leave it up to me.
Yeah.
I have occasionally had people who have tried to sort of specify exactly what paint they want me to use, which is sometimes okay, but painting's such an individual thing. And I could have a set of paints and a set of brushes. You three guys could have exactly the same, and the stuff would still come out looking completely different.
Well, they would, because especially if the ones that you gave to Neil, because they just wouldn't be painted.
Well, Neil's gone quiet.
Yeah, kick the brummy. It's always fun.
I was just not dignifying that blatant open goal scoring opportunity with a comment, because moving on, nothing to see here. Go on.
So paints then. So what sort of paints do you choose then?
I've got a right old mixture. Again, because I'm doing it full time, I can't really muck around with mixing paints, which is going to be absolute heresy to some people. I know. I can almost hear the Facebook verse going mad at such words. But yeah, essentially, I need to know that if I want to paint a certain type of green, I can just reach for those 2 or 3 pots, depending how many highlights I'm doing. And I've got a green that will cover my black undercoat. And then I've got a highlight and a final highlight if I need it. So I've got all sorts of paints. I've got lots of the Foundry 3-colour ones. I don't often use all 3 of the colours. I often find there'll be 2 out of the 3 that are really useful. So I use quite a lot of those. I still use a fair number of the Citadel ones. I tend to dip in and out of the Citadel ranges as they change them fairly regularly. But they're reds at the moment. They're the reds that I use. They've got a really nice sort of 4 or 5 reds into reddy oranges that they actually sit really nicely on top of each other. There lots of Vallejo. Got some of the war painter paints. I've got some Reaper paints. At the weekend up at Salute, I picked up some Aurora paints. A friend of mine, Christoph, he's a cracking painter that I know from Reading. And he swears by the Aurora set. So I did get a couple of sets of those just to try those. They're like the Vallejos, they're in sort of similar dropper bottles. But I got a white set, which has basically got 6 paints, basically to help you paint white, which seems a bit extravagant. But I've been mucking around with those over the last few days. So that's the other benefit of painting lots of unusual sort of hassle-free type figures. You get to muck around with different paints and try different techniques out on the figures while you're doing them.
Yeah. So how often are you reordering paint then? You must be getting through it.
Yeah. I suppose. Yeah, relatively. Yeah. I suppose I do. Yeah, because like I was saying about the Foundry triads. I mean, some of the pots of paint. There'll be like 1 pot of paint out of the 3 which I just don't use. And of course, when it comes to reordering them, it seems daft not to get the 3rd one because you're only paying pence for the 3rd one rather than buying 2 individual ones. So I end up, for example, Chestnut Light. I don't know why. I never use Chestnut Light. I think it's a bit thin for me. But Chestnut Shade and Chestnut, I use those all the time. So I've generally got one of the Shade and one of the Chestnut on the go, and somewhere in my massive sort of box of spare paints, there's probably 4 or 5 Chestnut Lights waiting to be opened for some. One day I'll find a use for it. And as I say, I'm always on the lookout for different paints. As I say, I've been doing this I've been sort of painting figures to any kind of standard for the best part of 30 years now, and I'm still trying out other people's paints. Some that I always pick up when I see them. The tree fellas, that you see at Derby and Partisan. They sell the ready-made terrain stuff.
Yeah, I've got some of their trees.
Yeah, well, their little rack of paints that they've got, they're cracking. Really, really good. I'd imagine it's the sort of paints that they use on their terrain features. And they're just called very sensible names like Khaki and Stone and Light Dun and things like that. They're really, really good. The sort of khaki shades are absolutely cracking. I've used that a lot. So yeah, I'm always on the lookout for paint. So I spent almost as much on paint as I did on anything else at Salute at the weekend. So I got a couple of the Scale 75 sets as well. So I'm always on the lookout for a bit of a paint addict, I think. I still use some of the old Revel Aquacolors. Yeah, they come in those sort of funny square blue pots.
I must admit, there are several colours of those. I've got some in front of me here.
Yeah.
Yes. People, yes, I do have paint on my desk. Yes.
Unopened, I may add.
Oh, some of these are well. Admittedly, there are some that are.
Knocked him off the desk once. 1996, he knocked two of them off the desk.
Sorry, we were saying Revel Aquacolor. Yes.
Yeah, I've still got. Yeah, I've got a few of those that I use. Yeah. So Coat d'Arms, I've got some of those. Another one that a relatively recent discovery for me. The Formula P3, the Privateer Press.
Oh, Privateer Press ones, yeah.
Very nice as well. Very heavily pigmented. Again, not for everyone, but the way I paint, where I need good coverage, I'm generally looking at the more heavier pigments. Obviously, if you're painting display pieces, you want sort of thinner, smoother paints probably. But for the sort of mass production painting that I'm doing, I just haven't got time to do multiple layers of the same color. I'll do multiple layers of different colors, with highlights, but not. My base coat needs to be pretty solid.
Yes, so that brings us on to a question which you kind of hinted at a couple of times already. And funny enough, it is a question that came on our Twitter feed from people when you were saying, ask questions. So one of the questions was undercoats.
Yeah.
Black, white, or grey? And you've already mentioned that you tend to use black, yeah?
And whose?
Yeah. Right, I don't use a spray. Again, I can hear the cries of heresy on Facebook land. I basically use one of those brushes I was talking about.
Yeah.
That's 99p down the post office. And I use a pot of Humbrol enamel.
Enamel?
That's Matte 33. It's even got my name on it. Not my age, sadly. Yeah, Humbrol enamel. I bulk buy the because you can't get the big tins anymore. So I bulk buy the I can't remember what they call it now. I'm just looking at a pot now. It's the 50ml pots. As you can imagine, I get through quite a lot of that. But yeah, I do it all by brush, mainly because I have tried sprays in the past, and I'm not an airbrusher. It's something I've never dabbled in. And I know that people who undercoat with airbrushes swear by it for getting really good coverage. But I haven't got one, and to be honest, I may be a little long in the tooth to start trying to become an expert with one. So I have tried the usual range of aerosol undercoats, but I tend to find there's so much of the undercuts that get missed that I end up going over a lot of it with a brush anyway. So I find it actually more efficient to actually just do it all in one hit with the brush. And then if I do miss anything, it's not very much normally. It would just be the odd spot, which I can easily cover when I'm painting. Yeah. I've sort of settled on black. I did my very first metal figures that I painted. I did use a white undercoat, mainly because that's the first thing that I saw someone else do. I think I learned most of my painting from clubmates. You didn't tend to get as many how to paint articles in magazines and stuff back in the sort of very early 80s. And so I used to basically nick ideas from people at the club because I really knew nothing about figure painting at all. And the first metal figures I actually painted, I painted straight onto the metal with enamels. So I knew absolutely no different. And then started going to the club, saw that people undercoated. I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I started off undercoating figures white. And to be honest, to this day, I think some of the nicest figures I've ever actually painted have been with a white undercoat. But I find it just takes that much longer, because if you white undercoat, obviously you've got to cover that white undercoat. That sounds stupid, but you have to cover the whole of the white undercoat.
Yeah.
And generally that's done with washes or some sort of lining after you finish the painting. And again, that's really quite time consuming. Whereas using the black undercoat, of course, anything that you leave behind, all right, is black. So it's the deepest recesses. I have got a couple of little tricks up my sleeve, which I use on what I describe as sort of brown figures and black figures. So if a figure is generally going to be wearing, tell you what, let's look at something on my desk, I can describe it. I've got some Foundry sort of Greek myths figures. So what I've done with those, yes, they're blacked out as usual. But when you look at the figure, essentially, he's going to have bronze armor. He's going to have some brown leather work. His weapon is a spear. That's essentially going to be brown based. Mm-hmm. His face and his flesh, there's a lot of flesh on show. That's essentially going to start with a brown base. Now, if I leave that as a black undercoat, I've got to paint all those areas brown. So what I do, I get, again, my trusty cheapy brush from the post office, and I get a Vallejo flat brown, and I basically do, well, you describe it as almost like a wet brush, so it's more than a dry brush.
Yeah. And
basically it gives all the raised areas, it basically turns it into a dark brown figure with black shadows, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And what that's done already, it's basically done the base coats for virtually the whole figure. So I also do the same. I was painting some sort of ninja type figures and some crooked dice, not Cylons, I can't remember what they call them now, Argonauts, which again are essentially a black figure, but rather than with armor, obviously.
Yeah.
So similarly with those, I black them out, and then again with my trusty big brush, I use one of those Revell Aqua Colors, which is Anthracite 36109, which is a really dark grey. And I basically do the same thing over the whole figure. So again, you end up with a very dark grey figure with black shadows. And essentially, again, you've done the base for all the slightly greyer bits that you're going to add to it. And all the metal work, it doesn't matter because that's going to cover up what you've done already. So I do start with a black undercoat. And but as I say, for certain figures like Dark Age figures, I've got a bunch of skeletons and Conan figures, which are mainly, obviously flesh and bone. So they're essentially brown figures. So they get the black undercoat, and then I give them this very heavy dry brush of the Vallejo flat brown. And the other thing is, one of the things that some people struggle with a black undercoat is that when it is black, they struggle to see the detail. Well, doing that extra level of dry brushing just lifts the detail out a bit more as well, so it makes it a lot easier to see.
Yeah,
I'm so nabbing that tip.
Yeah, that's.
Well, I have 2 boxes of Nightwatch to paint for a Game of Thrones game.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, obviously looking at mainly black and armor, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'm thinking of 2 subtly different wet brushes, one for the armor, one for the cloak, so they don't look the same.
Yeah. Well, this is it, because and black's always a tricky thing to highlight. I mean, there are lots of really clever ways of doing it, but the quickest way that I found to do it is almost do it at the beginning. So so get that big brush. I say it's important to still leave the black. You don't want to turn it into a grey undercoat or a brown undercoat.
Yeah,
because, that'll cause the same issues, because you'll find there's bits that you then need to cover up with a wash or something. But so what you're essentially doing, there's so many. Let's say Dark Age figures are typical of it, especially if they haven't got mail on. But even the ones that have got mail, I'll still do the brown. I'll still do the brown over the whole figure. Then the next thing I'll do is the chainmail, because the chainmail paints are generally quite heavily pigmented, so they will cover that. And if they don't, you can just put a wash over it, so it goes into all the nooks and crannies anyway. And to be honest, when you look at it, that's half the figure done. It's a great way of sort of speed painting as well. Because, as I say, if it's like a Dark Age figure where you're going to add drab colours to it, they'll sit on that brown, no problem at all. And in fact, some colours will sit on it and will look brighter anyway, like reds, for example, dark reds. They'll sit nicely over a brown. So give it a whirl. As I say, I use the Vallejo flat brown for that, which is 70.984, for the brown ones, and let's say anthracite, which is an aqua colour, Revel aqua colour. So there you go, top tips.
Cool.
Can't even remember how we got onto that subject now.
It was
undercoating.
Undercoating. I mean, have you ever used grey? I mean, I've been through a stage recently when I was actually using a grey undercoat, simply as well. I don't want to use white, and I thought, well, but this whole thing about black undercoats and getting coverage, especially from lighter colours and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, that's the deal that you sort of have to make. It sounds daft, but you're almost if using a white undercoat, as I say, you're going to benefit because the colours will be bright. You won't have to worry about if you want to do yellow. Like if I do yellow on a black figure, well, saying that I will probably be doing it over a brown, remembering what I've just been describing. But I'll have to put at least one base colour on before the yellow goes on, which I normally would anyway. But yellow just won't sit on a dark base. I haven't yet found one that will, which doesn't look like poster paint. So yes, with a white undercoat, you get the massive benefit of the bright colours. And as I say, some of the nicest figures I've ever seen painted have been done over white undercoats. An awful lot of display figures are done like that.
Speaking professionally, on a 1-to-1 basis, at a scale size, yellow and reds are actually the worst two colours to paint. They are. You can never get enough pigmentation, especially if you're doing a front door or something like that.
Oh, what in
decorating? Yeah. Reds and yellows are the devil's own work.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure me and Neil had a brief discussion about what yellows I was using at some point.
Yes, we did. Yeah, I think it was a Nottingham, wasn't it?
I think it was. Yeah, and the yellows that I actually use it's the Foundry ones, and I actually use their ochre, not their yellow. A lot of yellows are, to my eye anyway, they're quite chemically. If you follow, they're a bit too bright. They don't look very natural, especially on clothing. But the ochre shade. And then, so the shade 4A and the shade and the 4B, which is the mid one. Generally, I find they're good enough. You can use the light one as well, but the ochre shade is sort of an orangey, sort of very very light orangey brown sort of colour. And again, that sits quite nicely over a dark undercoat. Certainly well enough. I mean, you can give it another coat, but again, if you've done the sort of brown thing first, then you're actually painting over brown rather than black, which also helps. And yeah, I say my reds of choice at the moment are the Citadel ones, which have obviously all got bizarre names, because they do those nice base paints which are really really heavily pigmented. So yeah, there's Corn Red, which is a base one, and then I go through Mephiston, which is quite a nice pinky red, and then you can go on to what's the next one? Evil Sun Scarlet, which is a nice, then you're starting to get quite orangey. So if I'm doing British Napoleonics, I'll start with the Mephiston and then highlight with the Evil Suns. But if I want a more sort of pinky red, then I do the Corn Red followed by Mephiston. And then sometimes if I want a really pinky one, there's one, I love the names, Wazdaka Red, which is a very pinky red. And that's quite nice as well. And they all cover really well and work. They sit really nicely on top of each other as well. So they're my current reds of choice. But yeah, I mean I've got so many pots of various reds and yellows that I've tried over the years. But the Vallejo ones are always very good as well. I was using those until I started using the Citadel ones.
If you were the old, I mean, sort of digress, but the old decorators back in the day used to drop a bit of the top coat into the undercoat and mix it in, so that you ended up with, like, if you were doing a red door, that your undercoat would have a slight pink hue to it, or slightly pinky, to try and help give the your top coat a bit more depth.
Yeah. So sorry, going back to undercoats. Yeah, digressing horribly onto reds and yellows, but yes, it is linked. Yeah, so white undercoat, yes, you get all the benefits of the bright colours. But as I say, the main downside for me, purely when I'm trying to do it for speed, is that you have to cover every single piece of white. If you've coated white, and I'd also say this applies to grey as well, to be honest, because you can't really leave the grey showing. So, for example, think about your British infantrymen. You're going to really benefit on the reds, White's not necessarily so much, because although you've undercoat with a white, it won't necessarily. It will probably still need something on it.
Mm-hmm.
But things like shakos and packs and muskets and all that sort of thing, you're almost going to have to paint those. Well, obviously the shako is going to have to be black. So when you flip it around to the black undercoat, that black shako is black. The musket barrel is already black. Napoleonics is something that I obviously wouldn't recommend doing the brown, extra brown dry brush on, because it's just counterproductive, because you're going to be painting so much sort of white on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that tends to be just lots of layers of stuff. But again, whatever you're leaving is only going to be in the deep recesses, and that's at arm's length on the tabletop. That's fine as a sort of shadow effect. Again, with the white undercoat or the grey undercoat, you're going to have to fill those recesses with a darker shade. So whether that's with a darker paint or a wash or some sort of black lining, which one of my mates does. I mean, his figures look fabulous, but they just take so long, and I couldn't do it commercially. That's my take on undercoating. And one thing I will say is that there really are no rights and wrongs about painting. This is something that really does great with me, and I think it does put a lot of people off painting, or it can potentially put people off painting.
Yeah,
we're so spoiled now with painting videos, painting tutorials, painting guides, that I think people expect their figures to look like something that's going to win a Golden Demon Award. And I think somehow we need to give people the confidence that actually just get your paint on your figures in roughly the right place, nice base, stick them on the table, and they look fantastic. When we have one of our games down our club, I've got a couple of guys playing to the strongest. I mean, I've been painting for donkey's years. They're relatively new to painting figures. And to be honest, when they're all on the table, you can't tell who's been painting for 30 years and who's been painting for 5 years. You really can't. I do worry sometimes that people are put off because they have their first go at painting and they don't look like they see in the magazines or on the internet.
Mm.
I do worry sometimes that people could be put off, and I think that would be a shame, because for me, as I said, it's always been at least half of the hobby.
Yeah, I mean, there is this thing that obviously, from a media point of view, when companies are producing their figures, that they always want their figures to look the best.
Yeah, which is totally understandable.
Oh yeah, it's totally understandable. But then what tends to happen is that most pictures you see in magazines are of these incredibly high standard, well painted, high standard miniatures.
Yeah,
and people look at it and kind of go, okay, I need to paint like that.
Yeah.
I can never paint like that, and so why do I bother starting in the first place? And again, I mean, for me, the biggest, the best piece of advice I've ever received about painting, and shut your face, Mr. Love, I can hear you coming now.
Didn't say a word.
was yes, it wasn't. You see that pot there? You got to open it first. No, it wasn't that. But it was like, for example, if you're painting ancients, it's like basically make sure you paint the head, you do a decent job of the shield, and do a really good job of the base, and that's the thing that a lot of people see, and everything else, as long as you do, a decent job with it, then...
What is it we always say, does it pass the 2-foot test?
Yeah, quite.
Yeah. I know for a fact that my painting will not pass the 6 inches test, but it'll pass the 2-foot test, and that's all I care about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, the only time that I generally look at my figures that, incredibly closely is when I'm painting them. Even the ones that are for skirmish games, once they're on the table, you're not really looking at them as closely as you'd imagine. I mean, some of the younger guys at our club, I've sort of had this discussion with them, and they almost, I think they have almost been intimidated out of having a go. I mean, I was down at Firestorm Games a while ago, and there was a guy there. He was a young guy, but not that young. He must have been, I don't know, about 20-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And he was chatting to one of the guys down there, and was saying that he'd never painted before. And the guy that was, he had a box of figures. He said, I really want to have a go at painting these. And the guy he was chatting to was giving him all sorts of stuff about layering and washing and dry brushing, all these sort of things which you don't really need to know about when you're first starting. You just need to get the paint in the right place to start with, and then you can muck about with washes and all the clever stuff later on. And I just worry. I think there's so many kids they've dragged their mum into a Games Workshop, for example, or any other major figure supply.
Other gaming stores are available.
Yeah, absolutely. They get their box of, I don't know, Lord of the Rings elves, for example. It tells you what colours you need on the back. So you buy those colours, you go home, you have a go at painting them, and of course they look nothing like they do on the box. I don't know. You don't want to always be looking backwards, but I think the first figures that I was buying, you didn't have pictures of the painted figures. I mean, even the old Airfix stuff, it would tell you what paint you needed, and there'd be a diagram, but there weren't actually photos of the figures.
You were after a copy of Pericodes, The Armies at Waterloo, or something for reference.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, or like me going up the library and digging out a Blandford Press book,
Yeah, exactly.
And that was it. And then you thought, well, this red looks a bit like that red, so I'll just have a go with that. I don't know. Things have obviously moved on, and I wouldn't go back then, because the choice that I have as a figure painter now for materials and stuff is fantastic.
I mean, for those of us who aren't as good as you, Army Painter and Dips and Washes are the complete lifesaver.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Yeah, I'm not the best painter in the world. I'm never going to win a Golden Demon Award, but I paint to a level which is good enough that people will pay me to earn a living. There are people who earn a living as painters who paint far better than me, and there are also those who do it at a lower level, and they price it accordingly. And that's the thing, that there's no right or wrong way to paint a figure. That's just leapt into my head, actually. I got approached a few months ago it's totally out of the blue, and I still don't know where the guy got my details from. I got approached by a publishing company who were interested in getting me to write a book on painting figures. And initially I thought, it's rather flattering, a chance to get my name in print and stuff. And then I thought about it. I thought, I can't tell people how to paint figures, because all I can tell people is how I paint figures. And I went back to the publisher, because it gave me an idea of the sort of brief and how much it would be. And it was very tempting. But I said to him, he basically wanted how to paint figures, a sort of just a one-stop book on how to do it. And I said, I couldn't do it. I mean, like I said, I don't do airbrushing. You couldn't do a book on figure painting without a bit on airbrushing. But I don't do it. So, I'd be a total fraud to suddenly write a chapter on airbrushing. And the whole thing, just sort of disappeared, really, because I don't think he could quite get his head around the fact that I couldn't, because I did it for a living, that I couldn't just tell people how to paint figures. I thought, it wouldn't be right. If he wanted a book on how I do it, I could do that. Because, I still pinch ideas from any old article that I read, whoever's doing the painting. There's always new stuff to learn and new ideas, on colours and paints and techniques. As I said earlier, I sort of learned to paint from just looking at what other people did. And when I look back on that painting now, it wasn't what we'd now consider any sort of standard, but that's where I learned my basics from. And then you sort of flesh it out with all the stuff you learn over the years. So it's about 30 years I've been painting properly now.
A question after my own heart, actually, from Largy Hansen on Twitter, when he said, and I think you actually kind of answered this a little. You leapt in impulsively and answered this a little bit online. Yes, it was. Right, he simply asked the question: is there any good advice for those of us, Lars is saying, and I would definitely put myself in this camp, who are hopelessly slow painters?
Yeah, is that Dave sniggering?
Mr. Love, manners.
I can't actually remember what I said now. I think I said something along the lines of just don't worry about it. And one of my colleagues in the painting world, Sigurd from Battlebrush, I think he said something similar along the same lines. I think Sigurd said we're all slow painters, and I thought that's the funny thing to say. I thought, well, yeah, no, he's absolutely right. Painting takes time. There are obviously ways of speeding it up, with you can just do a base coat and a wash, base it nicely, and you'll get done quickly. A lot of it is down to what your sort of motivation is. Are you painting those figures to be display figures in a cabinet? Are you trying to enter a competition? Or have you got a game next Wednesday and you really need to get these figures done? Or are you putting a game on at Market Larden and you really need to get these figures done? No.
Never happens. Never happens.
See, I do listen. And that's essentially it. Yeah, there are. Yeah, it really is about the time that you put in. And I remember, I think, Neil, you had a bit where you were trying to do half an hour a day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And it did work.
Please don't ask how that's going.
Where'd you get that? Who told you that, Neil? Who gave you that idea?
So yeah, from a sort of technical point of view, there are ways of speeding things up, but if a lot of people are real perfectionists when it comes to their painting. It's a mate of mine, Mark, at the Gloucester Club. He cannot paint more than one figure at one time. The very idea of batch painting sends him into a total panic. So he will paint one figure start to finish, and then he'll paint the next figure, even if it's a load of, I don't know, Napoleonics or something where they're all the same. I couldn't possibly do that. It is really down to what you're trying to achieve. The more time you put in, the faster you'll get, the more you'll learn. That there are lots of painting guides and stuff out there, some of which are really good. I'm not saying that they're a bad thing at all. I use them myself, but it's people do find their own way. As so, we could all sit down with exactly the same paints and brushes, the same figures, and they'd all look differently because we use a brush differently. It's a bit. It sounds a bit pretentious, but it is an art form, really. So everyone's going to use a brush differently. There's not one way of holding a brush. Having another thing that's really helpful is having some sort of permanent or semi-permanent painting station. Even if it all lives on a tray. So all you have to do is get the tray out, stick it on your lap or on your table, paint for a bit, put it all away. Obviously my stuff's set up all the time, so I sort of fall downstairs in the morning, collapse into the chair and pick a paintbrush up, and that's me for the day.
Somebody else gave me that advice as well. I can't think of who it was.
But so that the more you paint, you just get to know the colours. As I was saying, that's why I've got so many pots of paint here, because the way I paint, and it is the way I paint, not anyone else should paint. I generally go for a black, dark undercoat. I'll put a base layer on and then one or two highlights. So I need my paints to be pigmented enough that I only need to do those 2 or 3 levels. If I have to put the same paint on twice to get coverage, that's slowing me down.
So when you say highlights, do you paint highlights or dry brush?
Paint. Yeah. Yeah, I paint them on basically, on the sort of raised areas, creases, that sort of thing. I suppose that the nearest...
I know Dave paints his highlights as well. I really struggle to get on with that.
I can sort of see how it's supposed to work, but I can't see to get the paint in the right place. Yeah, literally.
It's very much less is more, the way I do it anyway. I suppose the nearest that I would say, if I was going to get a book, would be like the Kev Dallimore one. I think that's probably the closest to the way that I paint. But whereas he will put a lot more interval layers in, because his stuff is generally being done for very close-up photos. I do a similar thing to him, but I'm generally using 1 or 2 highlights, whereas he might use more. But I think my style is probably closest. That's the sort of well-known person out there that I'm probably nearest to in the style.
Yeah.
So yes, I rarely dry brush. Apart from my sort of that sort of brown and grey base layer, and similar. Funny enough, I was thinking about your Norman Knights, Neil.
What you mean, the ones I foolishly glued onto the horses?
Not so foolish, Mr. Shuck.
Well, you meant to you ask, I suppose.
Yeah, I did mention to you, didn't I? That
yeah.
I did feel very sorry for you when the boys were picking on you that day, because The way I paint my Norman Knights, because they're the Conquest ones, aren't they? The plastic ones.
Yes, they are, yes.
Yeah, I fix them all together. I glue them on the horses. I glue the shields to the riders, and then I paint them. Again, I know it's heresy, but again, it's all down to why we do the black undercoat as well. Because if I was using a white undercoat, then I would leave the riders separate, because I'd have issues with where the rider joins the horse. That would need to be painted. And the backs of the shields and stuff like that would have to be painted somehow. Whereas where it's all done black, an awful lot of that is done for you. And similarly to the way that I would start with those, because they really are almost head to foot armor, aren't they? The Conquest ones. I basically do that first, again with one of my handy big brushes. I do the whole rider first, because it doesn't matter if it goes onto the bit of flesh that you can see or onto the shield, because that's all going to get painted over. And again, weird as it seems, the sort of excess white metal colour that you've dry brushed on actually will help you see the rest of the detail that you're going to be painting anyway. And the back of the shield isn't quite as important when it's already black, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
But so figures that are heavily armoured, I'd always do that sort of chainmail and armour layer first, because that's the messy bit. Always try and get the messy bit out of the way first. Because you're going to tidy it up with all the other stuff that you paint.
Well, Matt, thank you for chatting to us and giving us an impromptu painting clinic on the patented Matthew Slade way of painting figures. Right, okay. So, if anybody needs to get hold of you, how can they find you?
They go to my website, which is www.glenbrookgames.co.uk. There is a contact form on there. There's also a list of all the shows that I'm going to be attending for the rest of the year. I've got quite a few lined up. I think next one is Exeter, and then I'm going to the new Sheffield one at the end of May. Also on there, just a quick mention for my wife Debs, who's
yes, we must mention Saddle Goose.
Yes, just very briefly, because I know where time's getting on. But my wife Debs does the Saddle Goose Designs gaming bags, which have really taken off over the last year or so. They were done originally just to basically brighten up my trade stand and try and draw in a few different people to the stand who wouldn't normally come to a stand of painted figures. Yeah. But Debs is contactable through the Glenbrook Games site as well, although she's also got a Facebook page, which is Saddle Goose Designs. And she can do pretty much anything you like, gaming bag wise. She's got an embroidery machine, so she can do basically they're all done bespoke. So if you've got a particular emblem, we have a lot of people doing World War II insignia. Deb's just been doing a Chindits one, which is a really attractive badge actually. I wasn't familiar with it at all. It's a sort of a stylized lion with a little pagoda. I'd never seen that one before, so that one's been run off this evening.
I have a Lurdy's one with Trouble at Mill on the back, and very nice indeed too. It's a big thank you to Rich and Nick from Two Fat Lardies, who gave us permission to use their logos, which gave us a real, basically helped Debs pay for the machine. To be honest, the initial wave. It only got used as it's only so far been used as a token drawing bag for the 54mm 100 Years War game, but it does a very good job.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Of course, a lot of the bolt action crowd are using them because you draw the old dice out. And whenever I see a game that comes out that requires the drawing of a token from a bag, I get quite excited. Say, Debs, look at this. So hence the furry Congo bags. And for some bizarre reason, we've also just started doing. I say we, very much a royal we. Debs has started doing some Japanese themed ones. You'd almost think that a new samurai game would come out, but
that might require the use of some sort of a bag or receptacle in order to which to draw out.
Is that right, Neil? Really?
Yeah, hang on a second. I've just had another thought. There's been another game just released. There's been another game just released that requires you. Sword and Spear Fantasy requires the drawing of dice out of a bag.
Yeah.
Maybe perhaps you should have a word with your good lady and think, oh, hang on a minute, we need some nice fantasy emblems.
Yeah.
There you go.
Some nice generic ones. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, so that's commission too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so again, Debs is contactable through, say, the Glenbrook Games site. There's a contact page, or her own Facebook page, which is Saddle Goose Designed. And also, Debs has come to a lot more of the shows with me now. And whether she's there or not, I will have a good selection of the ones that we carry in stock if anyone wants to come and have a look. So, I think that's about it, really.
Brilliant stuff. Well, Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, that's right. It's been great.
And
good to have you. I have learned things.
Well, that's good, isn't it?
Indeed. Excellent stuff.
Try and learn something every day.
Look forward to seeing you on the circuit in a few weeks. And if nothing else, we'll bump into each other in Evesham in a month, several weeks' time.
Are you of the lightweight persuasion, or will we be seeing you on the Friday?
No, very lightweight. Well, it's actually quite close for us, so we'll be coming up on the day. But we'll be there for the post game festivities, of course. And me and Ralph are bringing up the old Martian practice. So
awesome.
Yeah, Ralph is
winner of the Steve Frisbee Memorial Trophy at Hereward Wargame Show. And richly deserved too.
Indeed, it did. Yes. Ralph's looking at boosting the sound system for the Test Match special theme, because when we did it down at Lardiff, you couldn't hear it because it was too noisy. So, we're hoping that the Test Match special theme will be piped through the hall this time.
I can always bring you the sound system we had for Dambusters.
Oh dear! Don't encourage him. Don't encourage him. Brilliant, Matt.
So if I don't see you before, I'll see you there.
Brilliant. Well, it's been a pleasure, mate. Take care, and we'll chat soon.
Will do. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
We always love to hear from you, our listeners. You can contact us in a couple of ways. You can do that via email at mailbag@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk, or you can now leave a voicemail message for us. The number to call is 0116 318 4114. Please note, call charges may apply. So there we have it. All the secrets behind how to paint miniatures for a living. 30, 28mm miniatures a day.
What? How would you do that?
By doing it professionally and have nothing else to do during the day. Remember, you and I do an 8-hour day working. Matt does an 8-hour day painting figures.
No, I think the upshot of that conversation was Matt does a bit more than an 8-hour day.
I think it might be closer to Matt does an 8-hour day painting figures and quite a bit more doing assorted random bits of prep, etc.
What things like sticking figures together, undercoating,
exactly.
basing, other bits and pieces, and every other spare time that he might have with a tray on his lap somewhere. Yeah. As you said, it beats working for the prison service.
Absolutely. And I suspect that you or I, to our painting standard, could probably batch paint 30 figures in. If we actually did nothing else, we could get it up to that kind of speed.
I'm so glad. I am so glad that Luffy is not on this part of the show. Because I got enough grief during that interview from Luffy about painting.
Yeah, but the difference is, if you don't paint, you don't have shiny toys. If Matt doesn't paint, Matt doesn't pay the gas bill.
Indeed. Yes.
It's a wonderful motivator.
Yes.
I'm actually seeing Matt and Ralph this Thursday.
No.
For a game. Yeah, they're coming down to Abergavenny.
Abergavenny?
Yeah.
Gaming capital of the world.
Indeed, yeah. It's quite close to them. So we're meeting up. We're we're doing that basic impetus scenario. My mate Mark has devised.
He did funny enough, he did mention it. He did mention that that they were going to Abergavenny. So he's obviously well motivated. Cool. But yeah, great bloke. And if you've enjoyed that and enjoyed our chat with Matt, you may be interested to know that afterwards, I mean, Matt quite enjoyed chatting with us, and we are kind of toying with the idea of bringing him back to do the odd painting clinic or agony aunt section or something like that. So watch this space. Obviously, you know, it depends a lot on Matt's timetable, but we thought it would be nice to have him back on. Yeah, as I say, to do the odd painting clinic from time to time, and answer all your questions. So watch this space. This may well not have been the last you've heard of Matt Slade on this show. So on that note, I think we're about done, aren't we, guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
I think we are.
Well, if you download this in time, if you download this before May the 21st, and have listened to it by then, if you're at the Partisan show on the 21st of May at Newark Showground, pop and say hi. Mike, you will be with the Peterborough Wargamers, will you not?
Resplendent as ever in Peterborough Wargames Club Blue.
Indeed. I will be wandering around the show, and I may even have the great Guru Luff in tow. You never know.
Grumpiness alert! Grumpiness alert!
Yes, if he decided that he hasn't got better things to do, he might come along to Partisan. But if not, I'll be at Partisan, and please come and say hi. It would be great to meet up and chat with everybody. So look forward to seeing you all then.
Indeed.
So until next time, thank you to Mr. Michael Whittaker.
You're, as ever, very welcome. That phrase is going to wind up in Meeples bingo, isn't it?
Probably. And it's great to have him back. The Welsh wizard himself. Thank you, Mr. Hobbs.
No, thank you. And remember, people, stay pure, be vigilant, behave.
Bye.
Don't buy anything. It dilutes the hobby.
Whoops. Beep, bleep. Sorry there, Neil.
And yes, so until next time.
Bye, folks. Roll good dice.
Happy gaming. Take care, and we will speak to you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media. And here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.